From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
There was this boss at some established office of some sort, and the boss asked one of his employees, happened to be a new employee actually, hadn't been working long, and he said, "Do you believe in life after death?" Seemed like an odd question, but the new employee replied, "In fact, yes sir, I do." And the boss then said, "Well then, that makes everything just fine. After you left early yesterday to go to your grandmother's funeral, she stopped in to see you." And we chuckled. So I want to start with a test this morning. I'm going to ask you a question, see how many of you get this right. If I were to ask you what the Bible tells us regarding what it was that God created on the first day of creation, what are those words that are found there in actually what is the third verse on the first page? It's kind of mumbled and jarbled, but I'm going to get that. You got it right. God said, "Let there be light." Right, okay. So you all get 100, you get an A. You should feel good about yourselves today. Today, we want to look at what is meant by the word light. We throw that word around a lot, and sometimes words just kind of whoosh on by. And really, words are symbolic of something. They should take us into really an experience, understanding what it is. It should really be splashing into our consciousness when we hear a word as provocative spiritually as that word is, and it carries the power and the meaning and has the significance and the importance that has been given to that word in particular. Okay? It's a very important word because we see it used throughout the scriptures in various ways. We have it, of course, as we've said, in the first day of creation, found in Genesis. We also have it where Jesus, throughout the Gospels, is speaking quite a bit about this idea of light. Most importantly, he says, "I am the light of the world," and he declares, "You are the light of the world." Now that is huge. And that's something that we need to understand really what he means by that in terms of light. He said this very early, this idea that I am the light of the world, you are the light of the world. He said this very early in his Sermon on the Mount, which I like to call the Seminar on the Mount. And so it is a word, this word light should not be taken lightly. We should really understand. Now the opposite of light is dark. Or darkness, okay? You can't see anything in the dark. We are blinded oftentimes by the dark. There is the darkness of ignorance. There is the darkness of separation. There is the darkness of the mind. There is the dark night of the soul. There are dark times that we go through, all being an absence of light. So we want to let there be light in our lives. We want to let there be light in our world and in our consciousness. It's very important. And it's important to realize what is meant by the word light. And so, as we have said, we find it first in those opening verses of the first page of the Bible, page 1 of Genesis, where we have the first 7 days of creation, the creation story. And on that first day, God said, "Let there be light." Now last week, if I can digress a moment, last week we talked about the fact that because there are different levels of consciousness among all of us, and that there are different and differing concepts of God that people may have, and there are varying degrees of understanding God and of activating God in their life, of manifesting God, of experiencing God. You could say, we said last week, that there are many gods. Now, in truth, there's only one God, but there are many gods in terms of the God that you and I have created by virtue of our past, our history, our dogma, the degree of unfoldment we've had, past lives, all kinds of factors that enter in. So we could say that your understanding of God is different from mine, your experience of God is different than mine, that your God is different than mine, and we could say then that there are many gods, okay? Because there are many people having a different God consciousness. All that to say, there are many Bibles. There are many Bibles, many scriptures, if you want to say it that way. We have many translations of the Bible in print. In addition to that, we have many differing views of how to interpret the Bible. In fact, there are those who only take the Bible literally, refuse to interpret even one word of the Bible. There are those who interpret it a little. There are those who interpret it a bit more. And then there are those who go really beyond the literal and into the mystical messages that are contained within its stories and messages. It has been said by some philosophers and mystics that there are at least 7 levels of understanding in the scriptures of the Bible. Depending on where an individual is in their own spiritual development and unfoldment, their progression, their evolution, as to whether or not these messages of different levels will jump out at them. So you should know that here at Unity, we basically seek to go beyond the literal. And we are what we call, bring forth metaphysics or metaphysical lessons and teachings, metaphysical interpretations. Meta meaning beyond the physical, beyond the literal really is what it's saying. So we try to go deeper, and that's what it's about. And in those mystical or metaphysical teachings and interpretations, there is a bit of the mystical flavoring that you can find in them. And philosophers through the ages have also told us how important it is to know thyself. Know thyself. And that it is in coming to know one's self that one begins to discover the secrets of the universe and some of the mysteries of the universe. But it all begins with a journey inward. And these things begin to break free in us. Well, the Bible, at one of its deeper levels, is about revealing truths about ourselves. That's a big part of what the Bible is at one level. And it's important that you understand that various aspects of the Bible and its scriptures are trying to reveal the truth about yourself and help you to come to know thyself. All right? Certainly not all of it. There is some that is history, there is some that is poetry, there's some that are all kinds of laws and details and what have you. But there are other parts that are juicy with mystical opportunities to understand at a deeper level and gain other insights. So what I'm saying is that when a person looks at the 7 days of creation in the Bible, one has to go deeper than seeking this as only some story of history about the creation of earth and so forth, or that it is somehow 7 days of work accomplished by an anthropomorphic God. Anthropomorphic means, attributing human shape and characteristics to a God. So we have to remember that we must go beyond thinking of God as a man standing off in the sky, manipulating and changing and doing these things. Some people have said and believe that the earth was, put together 6,000 years ago, and yet science clearly says actually that even the walls of the Grand Canyon are dated, some of them, 4 billion years old. So I would like to have you think essentially that the 7 days of creation, think of them as being more mystical. It has something more to say. So you go beyond the surface and begin to think of those 7 days of creation as perhaps 7 steps, 7 keys, a process of helping an individual discover the truth about life and the truth about ourselves. You with me? Okay. So the creation story is not something necessarily God did, but has to do with what God is and what God is in you, okay? 7 days reveals something about steps in a process. that you and we must be about on our path that somehow begins with grasping the idea that we are light. You understand? That the creative process always begins with light, and that how we create our lives and what we do with our lives has to do with let there be light, right? Everyone is a creative being. Everyone is creating all the time through their thoughts, words, deeds. That's a fact. We all accept that. So creation, the creation story is not necessarily something God did in 7 days. Can be, if you want it to be, but maybe on another level it's saying something else about you and me that's really important in relationship to let there be light. First and foremost, before you do anything, no, let there be light in your process of unfoldment. Creation and creating is what God is, and that's what you and I are. We're creating all the time. And to create with the divine will produce light. And to create apart and separate from the divine will begin to dim and lack luminosity. Varying degrees of dimness comes into being. And so we tend to think of, creation as only an outer expression out there, but all creation begins inwardly. All creation begins within. And that has to do with every aspect of your life. And all outer creation is basically all matter, science tells us, is broken down into subatomic particles and is just traced back to light. Okay? It's light in various dense forms. We say everything is energy. Everything is energy, okay? And light, of course, is a form of energy. Of course, we've discovered electricity, and that's electrical energy. And so we have understood how to channel that. It can light our household. It can light a whole city, okay? We've learned to produce it. We've learned to store it. We've learned to use it and channel it in many positive ways. Well, you have to understand that there is also an energy that for all of us comes from within. It doesn't have to do with electricity. It's a spiritual energy. It's produced separate also from the food you eat, from the sleep you may need. The source of this energy is not food or sleep. Matter of fact, if you are emotionally and mentally drained, food is not going to help you. And so we can go from feeling tired and drained to a great aliveness coming over us, with enthusiasm, simply by kind of being given a new intention or being introduced to something that we're excited about that enlivens us versus the conflict that it may have taken us down and drained us. So there can be that kind of shift. We're all using energy, even when we move our body. Every motion requires energy. Every thought requires an energy. Every emotion requires the movement of energy through you. In other words, an expenditure of energy. And when we have a mental conflict going on, that fight and that struggle is using energy, and a person can eventually come to feel drained. And when we are doing something that we love and that we enjoy, the level of energy changes, and it begins to expand, it begins to increase. We can have, in our lives, significant shifts in our energy levels, and we do have. So the question is, where does this energy come from? What causes the shift? Well, light is energy. God is light. You are, in reality, light. The light of God. Just as a drop of water in the ocean is not the whole ocean, but it contains all the qualities and properties and characteristics of the ocean, so too, we can say God is light, and each of us is a ray of that light, and it carries the spark of the divine. That is our reality. The light is unlimited life energy. Unlimited. And we either be it or block it. All right? It's as simple as that. There is unlimited life energy, and we are on a journey, a path of life in which we are either being it or blocking it. And hopefully we're learning not to block it and to be it. So that's why we have Jesus teaching us that not only is he the light of the world, but he's saying you too are the light of the world. And that is really our reality, that is our truth, that is what we are held to be in the mind of God, and that is what we are about as our mission on earth, is to be the light that we truly are and not block it. And Jesus says essentially we are to rise up and be a light, just as a city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. That's your role. He says, just as a candle is not lit to be put under a basket and hid, be covered, it's to be uncovered and let the light go to all who are in the household, he says. And so it is with you. And obviously, the transition of that is that our house is the world in which we live. It's not just the house that shelters us. It's the world. It's wherever we go. This is our house. And that's what Jesus is saying. So let your light so shine, Jesus is saying, so that others will see your good works. And in that way, you will be an example to others as I am, and you will help others remember who they are as I am doing. And Jesus continues and says, you'll be glorifying your Father to be a light. Don't block it, don't hide it, be it. That's what he's saying. And then Jesus goes on in this seminar on the Mount, and he gives a composite of the teachings of how to be it and not block it. Okay? You can find this, his Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. But it's a composite of teachings. And in it, he talks about uprooting anger. He talks about unconditional love, and even to the point where you should be loving your enemies. He talks about the importance of prayer. He talks about the importance of forgiveness. He talks about the importance of laying up treasures not just on earth, but treasures in your heart that you take with you as an eternal being. And a whole host of other things that are about being it and not blocking it. That's his whole sermon. About halfway through his presentation on the Mount, he brings up again the word light. And this time, he essentially says that one's body is a vehicle of the light that you are. All right? And that your body will give you feedback on how you're doing in being a light. That you can feel in your body energetically what it feels like to have the light of God be coming on in you. And you can feel what it feels like when you're dimming the light and heading for darkness and separation. You know? That you can feel when you are attuned to the divine. You can feel the reality of who you are. That your physical body actually gives you feedback. And he talks about this and the benefits in the context of keeping your focus and having the right focus. And he refers to the singleness of a focus on the truth that light is what you are. And the way he says it is that the light of the body is the eye, E-Y-E. And if, therefore, your eye is single, your whole body is full of light. Wow. You know what it's like to have your whole body full of light? You're just so jazzed, so energized, so alive. You know who you are, and there's just not one strand of anything that is of conflict or separation. You can feel it. It's the utmost joy. It's the utmost peace. It's the utmost freedom, you know. Well, then he mentions the opposite, you know, if one's eye be evil, which is to live in reverse. If you ever have noticed the word live backwards is evil, all right? So if you are mismanaging the energies of life and light, you'll get darkness. Or what he says is, then if one's eye be evil, then your whole body will be full of darkness. Basically, it's depressing and blocking the light. And so Jesus states also in the Gospel of John, chapter 12, he says, I have come as a light into the world, that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness. So whoever believes in me and lives these teachings that I'm sharing, your way out of darkness is made clear. One of the stories that a wonderful author, Eric Butterworth, Unity author, he wrote many books, but in one of his books he had an article about a guy. It got his attention. It was apparently in a magazine or something. It was written by Jacques Lusserand, and Jacques happened to be blind. And the title of his article was Blindness, A New Seeing of the World. And the author tells how he lost his eyesight at age 8, and he was a brilliant student. And in the article, basically, he wrote about being a bit disturbed by the seeming lack of recognition that the world is not just outside of us, but also within us. That as becoming blind, he realized there's a whole other world here. And he tells what his experience was like in becoming blind, having the scary challenge of having to find his way between things like doors and walls and people and trees and what have you. And he said that early on, he made a discovery that although he could not see the light of the world outside of himself, the light was still within him. He was able to have a sense of a light internally, more so being blind. And he determined that as long as he paid attention to the light within him, he rarely had problems getting around or what have you. He also discovered that there was only one way to see this inner light, and that was through love. And when he opened to love, he opened to the light getting brighter inside of him. And he said if he was overcome by sorrow or self-pity, or when anger took hold of him, or if he envied others, his light, he said, immediately decreased. He said even sometimes it felt like it went out completely. But the blindness was not the result of a loss of vision, he said. It was the result of a loss of loving, when he stopped loving. And so this man was not able to see outside, the light outside of himself, but he certainly was able to see with the light from within. And also supports that it is through love that we become a light in the world, that love and light are really synonymous. It appears that we have an inner eye that we can become centered in. And there's a Hebrew word, actually, that is a Hebrew word for the word eye, E-Y-E. The Hebrew word is ayin, A-Y-I-N. And what it means is fountain. And so one could say there is a fountain of light and energy that flows forth from the person who sees with light and lives with light, the inner light. It's the whole idea, again, that your whole body is full of light. It's the whole idea, if you see with a single eye, it's the fountain of energy that is flowing through you. Near-death experiences tell us that, thousands have experienced a presence that has appeared to them as a light, and that contained within that light was an emanating love that was beyond description. The love was so intense and so great coming at them. One of Jesus' Beatitudes that he shared early on in the Sermon on the Mount was, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." We don't have to wait till we cross the veil and die or have a near-death experience to see God. It's for us to be a light and begin to see God everywhere, in everyone, in everything. And then we begin to make a tremendous contribution, you see. In the writings of Hafiz, some of you love Hafiz, he states, "I wish I could show you, when you are lonely and in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being." In other words, he's saying, when you're in a dark place, I just wish I could show you who you really are, the astonishing light of your true being. Plato, he said, we can forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. Jesus mentions light in another passage, and it's kind of interesting. He says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Usually when we read "my burden is light," we think of it being not heavy. But that would be kind of literal. If we went a little bit further, had the insight, we would maybe see that the only true burden we really have is to be a light in the world. It's not easy. It's the mission, what we've come to be and do, so our burden is to be light. You know, it says also, take my yoke upon you, Jesus is saying, and learn of me. Well, a yoke, you know, is a wooden frame for harnessing together a pair of oxen. Except in this case, Jesus is really trying to say, referring to the idea of oneness, of joining together with him, moving forward to be a light in the world, taking on that burden of pulling that wagon, making a difference while you're here. In 1 Thessalonians it states, you are all children of light. Couldn't be any clearer. So we can't deny that there is darkness in the world. We have both darkness and light. We have the contrast. One reflects separation, the other reflects oneness. And I believe the light is winning. And we can be grateful to all those souls who are on this planet who are conscientiously seeking to be a light in the world. They understand what their burden is, light, okay? That's what they're here to be about. Spiritual masters tell us that one person who is awakened to the light offsets several thousand who are not. Do you see the difference that it can be making in the world as light is seeking to win over darkness? As awakening is trying to win over those who are asleep and separate and apart and distant from the truth of who they are. Prayer and meditation is a way of course, recentering ourselves with this inner light, recognizing that in prayer, it's not to pray to God, but to pray from the consciousness of God. So if God is light, we're not praying to a light, we're praying from the light of God that has been placed within us, okay? That we really are. Every day it would be wise for us to get up and take the time to be focused on the idea that light is what we are and that we're a channel through which God is as energies of love and goodness pouring itself of brightness and radiance on into the world. Let your day begin by affirming, let there be light. Let there be light. In the shower, let there be light. Let there be light. Whatever. When the driver cuts you off on the freeway, let there be light. Let there be light. You know, when you're tempted with fear or anger or impatience, let there be light. Let there be light in healing my body. Let there be light in prospering my life. Let there be light in furthering my relationships. Let there be light. Let there be light. A most sacred thing about you is that you carry the light of God within you. Don't block it. Just be it. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.